Dr. Aisha Bennett, a humble and respected black surgeon in the small town of Willowbrook, fiercely combats systemic racism and bias within St. Mary's Hospital. Despite her wealth and powerful position, she faces overt discrimination and undermining from colleagues like Officer Daniels and Dr. Evelyn Shaw, who dismiss her efforts to ensure equitable patient care. Aisha uncovers disturbing patterns of prejudice treatment and experiences escalating hostility, including sabotage and violent confrontations. Her unwavering professionalism is relentlessly tested as she strives to dismantle deeply ingrained institutional racism, igniting intense conflict and frustration. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across the quiet streets of Willowbrook. The town was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where the local diner served as the unofficial hub of community gossip and camaraderie. At Maggie's Corner, a cozy diner nestled between the town library and a quaint florist shop, the clinking of coffee cups and the soft hum of conversation created a comforting backdrop. Dr. Aisha Bennett pushed open the glass door, the familiar chime announcing her arrival. She slipped inside, her presence unassuming, blending seamlessly with the regulars who occupied the red vinyl booths and the counter seats. Aisha's tall frame was dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, her curly hair pulled back into a low ponytail. Her white coat was absent, replaced by a casual outfit that belied her status as one of the city's most renowned surgeons. Aisha had built her career with relentless determination and skill, rising through the ranks to become the head of the cardiology department at St. Mary's Hospital in nearby Crestwood. Her accolades were numerous, from pioneering minimally invasive heart procedures to mentoring young medical students from diverse backgrounds. Yet despite her professional success, she chose to live modestly in Willowbrook, valuing the close-knit community over the bustling life of the metropolis. As she took a seat at her usual spot by the window, Aisha noticed the familiar faces around her. Maggie, the owner, greeted her with a warm smile. "Aisha, the usual?" Aisha returned the smile, nodding. "Yes, please, Maggie, black coffee, no sugar." Maggie, a stout woman with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, poured the coffee with practiced ease. "You're a busy woman, Dr. Bennett. What brings you out here this evening?" Aisha glanced out the window, watching the golden light reflect off the glass storefronts. "Needed a break. Sometimes it's good to just sit and watch the town breathe, you know?" Maggie placed the steaming mug in front of her, sliding into the seat opposite. "I hear you. The hospital's been hectic lately, especially with the new equipment they installed, but you always manage to stay so grounded." Aisha shrugged lightly. "It's just what I do. People need someone to listen, to care." As she sipped her coffee, a young woman entered the diner, her face flushed from the cold evening air. Aisha watched as the newcomer made her way to the counter, her movements hurried and tense. The woman approached Maggie, who greeted her with a sympathetic nod. "Riley," Maggie called softly, her eyes meeting Aisha's in silent acknowledgement. Riley Thompson was a single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet. She often sought solace at Maggie's Corner after long shifts, finding comfort in the familiar environment and the friendly faces that greeted her. Aisha noticed Riley's demeanor, the way her shoulders slumped, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Something was amiss. She decided to reach out. "Aisha, can I talk to you for a moment?" Riley asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as she turned to Aisha. Aisha nodded, gesturing for Riley to take a seat beside her. "Of course. Riley, what's on your mind?" Riley hesitated, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "It's about the school nurse. She's been acting strange lately, avoiding my son Marcus. He's been having some health issues, and I think she's not taking him seriously." Aisha listened intently, her professional instincts kicking in. "Tell me more. What makes you feel that way?" Riley glanced around the diner, lowering her voice further. "Marcus has asthma, and he's been having more frequent attacks. I've brought him here for checkups. But lately, the nurse seems dismissive. She says he's fine, but I can tell he's struggling." Aisha's mind raced. As a surgeon, she knew the importance of attentive care, especially for a child with asthma. But she also understood the subtle biases that could influence behavior, especially in predominantly white institutions. "I'll look into it. Aisha assured her. "Can you give me the nurse's name?" Riley nodded, relief evident in her eyes. "Her name is Karen Matthews." Maggie watched the interaction with a hint of concern. She'd noticed Riley's growing anxiety over the past few months, as Marcus's condition seemed to worsen. Later that evening, after finishing her coffee, Aisha left the diner, the cool night air refreshing after the warmth inside. As she walked down the street, her thoughts lingered on Riley's words. She knew she couldn't ignore this. Someone in a position of authority was possibly neglecting a child's health due to subconscious prejudices. Upon reaching her modest home, Aisha's phone buzzed with a message from her assistant. "Meeting at 3 p.m. at the hospital. Urgent." She sighed, knowing that her day was far from over. Despite her efforts to maintain a humble lifestyle, her role as a top surgeon meant she was constantly navigating the delicate balance between personal and professional life. At St. Mary's Hospital, the corridors were busy. Filled with the usual hustle of medical staff and patients, Aisha made her way to her office, passing by familiar faces and nodding greetings. The hospital was a microcosm of the broader society, reflecting both its progress and its persistent issues. Entering her office, Aisha found Dr. Michael Harper, the head of the hospital's ethics committee, waiting for her. "Aisha," he greeted her warmly. "Glad you could make it." Aisha took a seat, her demeanor calm yet attentive. "What's the matter, Michael?" "There have been some reports concerning patient care standards, particularly regarding how certain staff members interact with patients from diverse backgrounds," he explained. "We need to address these issues promptly to maintain our hospital's reputation and ensure equitable treatment for all our patients." Aisha leaned forward, her expression serious. "Tell me more. Are there specific incidents we should be aware of?" Michael nodded. "Several complaints have been filed over the past few months, highlighting a pattern of dismissive behavior and inadequate care. It's troubling, and we need to investigate thoroughly." Aisha felt a knot tighten in her stomach. While the hospital had made strides in diversity and inclusion, systemic biases were harder to root out. "I'll start by reviewing the cases and speaking with the staff involved. We can't afford to overlook anything, especially not when patients' well-being is at stake." Michael gave her a reassuring smile. "I knew I could count on you. Your leadership in the cardiology department has been exemplary, and I believe you're the right person to spearhead this initiative." Aisha nodded, determination hardening her resolve. "I'll get right on it." Leaving Michael's office, Aisha felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The social climate was shifting, and the hospital was under scrutiny to ensure that progress was genuine and not just surface level. She knew that addressing these issues would require more than just policy changes. It would necessitate a cultural shift within the institution. Back at home, Aisha sat down with her family for dinner. Her husband, Marcus Bennett Jr., was a high school principal, dedicated to fostering an inclusive environment at Willowbrook High. Their teenage daughter, Kiara, was a spirited college student, passionate about social justice. The Bennetts were a picture of a modern, successful Black family, accomplished, respected, yet grounded in their values of humility and service. As they shared their day's experiences, Aisha recounted her conversation with Riley and the meeting with Michael. "And so, I decided to take it upon myself to look into this issue with Nurse Matthews," Aisha said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You know how these things can be. It might just be a misunderstanding." Aisha shook her head. "I don't think so. Riley's pretty sure something's off, and I want to make sure Marcus gets the care he needs. It's about more than just one patient. It's about ensuring fairness and compassion in our hospital." Kiara, who had been listening intently, chimed in. "Maybe it's time to organize something like a workshop or a training session on unconscious bias, not just for nurses, but for everyone here." Aisha smiled, pride swelling in her chest. "That's a great idea, Kiara. I've been thinking about how we can implement more comprehensive training programs to address these biases. It starts with awareness." As the evening progressed, the Bennetts felt the calm before the storm. Aisha knew that her decision to investigate Riley's concerns would set off a chain of events that could challenge the status quo. The societal challenges were simmering beneath the surface, and her actions could either bridge gaps or deepen divides. The following morning, Aisha arrived at St. Mary's earlier than usual, the hospital still quiet in the pre-dawn hours. She found Nurse Karen Matthews alone in the staff lounge, preparing her shift. "Good morning, Karen," Aisha greeted softly, pulling up a chair beside her. Karen looked up, startled. "Oh, Dr. Bennett, morning." Aisha gave a warm, reassuring smile. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." Karen's expression shifted to one of concern. "Sure. What's on your mind?" Aisha took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I received a report from one of our patients about some concerns regarding his care. It was about your recent interactions with him. I wanted to understand what happened from your perspective." Karen's eyes darted away, her hands fidgeting with her uniform. I just thought he was exaggerating his symptoms. He's had several attacks already, but he's been on his meds. Maybe he just needs to manage his condition better." Aisha nodded thoughtfully. "I understand it can be challenging, but it's crucial to ensure that all our patients feel heard and cared for, regardless of their background. Riley mentioned that Marcus felt you were dismissive. How do you think we can improve in that area?" Karen looked down, biting her lip. "I guess I could have been more patient. It's just frustrating when patients don't follow through with their treatment plans." Aisha placed a hand gently on Karen's shoulder. "I appreciate your honesty, Karen. We all have our moments of frustration, but we need to make sure that doesn't impact the quality of care we provide. Let's work together on this. Maybe we can arrange some additional training or support for you." Karen sighed, a mixture of relief and resignation washing over her. "Thank you, Aisha. I'll try to do better." Aisha offered a reassuring smile. "That's all I ask. We're a team, and we all want what's best for our patients." As Aisha left the staff lounge, she felt a sense of cautious optimism. This was just the beginning, but it was a necessary step toward fostering a more inclusive and empathetic environment at St. Mary's. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was determined to lead by example, just as her family had taught her. Driving to work that afternoon, Aisha reflected on the social climate outside her hospital walls. Willowbrook was a town of progress, yet pockets of prejudice still lingered. The recent national conversations about racial inequality had sparked discussions in the community, but change was slow and often met with resistance. At St. Mary's, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Aisha convened a meeting with the hospital's diversity committee, a group dedicated to addressing and dismantling systemic biases within the institution. They gathered in the conference room, the sunlight filtering through the blinds casting stripes across the long table. "We have a responsibility to ensure that every patient feels valued and respected here," Aisha began, her voice firm yet compassionate. "Our goal is to identify and address any unconscious biases that may be affecting our care. This isn't just about compliance, it's about embodying the principles of equity and compassion that are the foundation of our mission." Dr. Harper nodded in agreement. "We need to implement comprehensive training programs and create open channels for feedback. It's essential that everyone feels comfortable voicing their concerns and contributing to a more inclusive environment." Nurse Lillian Thompson, a veteran nurse with decades of experience, spoke up. "I've seen changes over the years, but there's still work to be done. It's not just about training, it's about changing the culture from the ground up." Aisha smiled, appreciating Lillian's insight. "Exactly. It starts with awareness and continues with consistent effort. We'll begin by scheduling mandatory workshops and setting up anonymous surveys to gather honest feedback from our staff and patients." As the meeting concluded, Aisha felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that the path to meaningful change was paved with challenges, but she was ready to confront them head-on. The subtle prejudices and systemic barriers within the hospital mirrored the broader societal issues, and she was determined to be a catalyst for transformation. That evening, as the town of Willowbrook settled into the peaceful embrace of night, Aisha sat by her kitchen window, the same one where her family often gathered for dinner. She looked out at the star-studded sky, her thoughts a whirlwind of strategy and empathy. Her journey was just beginning, but she felt grounded in her mission: to blend her position of power with humility, to listen, to act, and to foster a community where everyone, regardless of their background, could thrive. As she sipped her evening tea, her phone buzzed with a message from Kiara. "Proud of you today. Keep shining." Aisha smiled, feeling the strength of her family's support. She knew the challenges ahead, but with their unwavering encouragement, she was ready to face whatever came her way. The following morning, Willowbrook greeted Dr. Aisha Bennett with a crisp, clear sky. The town was waking up slowly, the streets still quiet, save for the occasional car passing by and the distant hum of construction workers laying new pavement. Aisha felt the weight of her responsibilities as she prepared for another day at St. Mary's Hospital, knowing that today's agenda might further complicate her already demanding schedule. As she entered the hospital, the familiar antiseptic smell enveloped her, a stark contrast to the cozy atmosphere of Maggie's corner. The corridors were bustling with activity, nurses hurrying to their assignments, doctors discussing cases in hushed tones, and patients moving from one department to another. Despite the chaos, Aisha moved with purpose, her demeanor calm and collected. Her first stop was the Ethics Committee office, where Dr. Michael Harper awaited her. The room was spacious, adorned with framed certificates and inspirational quotes about integrity and compassion. Michael stood up as she entered, his expression serious but welcoming. "Aisha, thank you for coming so promptly," he greeted, extending his hand. Aisha shook his hand firmly. "Of course, Michael, I want to ensure we address these concerns thoroughly." They sat down at the large oak table, where several documents lay neatly stacked. Michael slid a folder across to her. "These are the recent complaints we've received. Most of them involve patient interactions that have been deemed subpar, particularly concerning staff members who may be allowing personal biases to influence their professional conduct." Aisha opened the folder, scanning through the detailed reports. Each complaint was meticulously documented, highlighting instances where patients felt unheard, dismissed, or undervalued. One report in particular caught her eye. It detailed Riley Thompson's concerns about nurse Karen Matthews' treatment of her son, Marcus. "We need to investigate these incidents without delay," Michael emphasized. "Our reputation is at stake, and more importantly, so is the well-being of our patients." Aisha nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. I've already spoken with Riley, and it seems there might be a pattern of behavior that needs to be addressed. I plan to review these cases personally and speak with the staff involved." Michael leaned forward, his tone earnest. "That's a good approach. We need someone with your expertise and integrity leading this effort. However, be prepared for resistance. Some staff members might not take kindly to being scrutinized." Aisha met his gaze steadily. "I understand. But if we don't address these issues now, they'll only worsen." As she left the Ethics Committee office, Aisha felt a surge of determination. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was resolute in her mission to ensure equitable treatment for all patients. Her mind raced with strategies and potential obstacles, but she remained composed, her professional training guiding her every step. Later that morning, Aisha had a meeting scheduled with Nurse Matthews. She arrived early, choosing a small conference room away from the bustling main hall to ensure privacy. As she waited, she reviewed her notes, preparing to approach the conversation with both firmness and empathy. Karen Matthews entered the room, her face a mixture of apprehension and defensiveness. She was a seasoned nurse, respected for her technical skills, but Aisha had heard whispers about her rigid demeanor with certain patients. "Good morning, Karen," Aisha began softly, gesturing for her to sit. Karen sat down, her eyes darting around the room, before settling on Aisha. "Good morning, Dr. Bennett." Aisha took a deep breath, maintaining eye contact. "I wanted to discuss some recent concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding patient interactions. Specifically, there have been reports about your treatment of a patient named Marcus Thompson." Karen's jaw tightened, her posture stiffening. "I've heard about that. But Marcus has been following his asthma treatment plan. Maybe he just needs to manage his condition better." Aisha nodded slowly. "I understand that managing a chronic condition can be challenging, but it's crucial that our patients feel supported and heard. Riley Thompson has expressed feeling dismissed during her visits, and Marcus's health is our top priority." Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes flickering with irritation. "I'm just trying to ensure that patients take their treatment seriously. Sometimes, they need a little push." Aisha leaned forward, her tone measured and calm. "I appreciate your dedication to patient care, Karen. However, it's important that our approach remains compassionate and non-judgmental. Can you share your perspective on what happened during Marcus's visits?" Karen hesitated, her fingers nervously twisting a pen. "He's been having more frequent asthma attacks lately. I thought maybe he wasn't adhering to his medication schedule. I was trying to encourage him to be more proactive about his health. Aisha studied Karen's expression, noting the tension beneath her professional facade. Encouragement is important, but so is empathy. Perhaps we could work together to find a more supportive approach that addresses Marcus's needs without making him feel undervalued. Karen sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. I suppose I could try to be more patient. It's just frustrating when patients don't follow through with their treatment plans. Aisha offered a reassuring smile. I understand the frustration, but our role is to facilitate and support, not to judge. Let's schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss strategies for improving patient interactions. We're all here to help our patients achieve the best possible outcomes. Karen nodded reluctantly. All right, Dr. Bennett. I'll do my best. As Aisha left the conference room, she felt a mix of relief and concern. The conversation had been challenging, but she had maintained her composure, addressing the issue without escalating tensions. However, she sensed that Karen was resistant to change, a sign that deeper issues might be at play. Back in her office, Aisha received a call from her husband, Marcus Bennett Jr. His voice was strained, a hint of worry underlying his words. Hey Aisha. How did it go with Karen? Aisha smiled softly, taking a moment to choose her words. It was a productive conversation. I think Karen is willing to work on her approach, but it will take time. How was your day at the school? Marcus sighed. Same old, we're preparing for the statewide education conference next month. There's a lot on my plate, and I'm trying to balance everything with Kiara's activism. Aisha reached out, placing her hand over his. I know it's a lot, but you're doing an incredible job. We're all here to support each other. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Kiara entered, her face flushed from running up and down the stairs. Mom, Dad, have you seen the latest news someone's filming outside the hospital? Aisha's heart skipped a beat. What? Why? Kiara shrugged, her eyes wide with concern. I don't know, but there are a lot of people gathered. It looks serious. Aisha exchanged a worried glance with Marcus. Without a word, she grabbed her phone and headed toward the window, peering out to see a crowd of protesters holding signs and chanting slogans. The banners read things like, Equal care for all, and End systemic bias. Marcus joined her at the window, his expression tense. What's going on? Aisha frowned, her mind racing. I need to find out. Let's go. They hurried outside, the crisp morning air filled with the sounds of determined voices and the rustling of protest signs. The crowd was a mix of hospital staff, patients, and community members, all united in their demand for equitable healthcare practices. Aisha pushed through the throng, her presence commanding respect despite her modest attire. She approached a makeshift stage set up at the far end of the parking lot, where a woman in her early 30s was speaking passionately to the crowd. Thank you all for coming, the speaker began, her voice strong and clear. We're here today because our community deserves better. We deserve healthcare that is fair, unbiased, and compassionate. No more dismissive attitudes, no more systemic barriers. Aisha felt a pang of responsibility. These were her patients, her colleagues, and her community. She stepped forward, raising her hands to signal her desire to speak. Everyone, please listen, she called out, her voice steady. I'm Dr. Aisha Bennett, head of cardiology at St. Mary's Hospital. I hear your concerns, and I want you to know that I am committed to addressing these issues. Together, we can create a more inclusive and supportive environment for everyone. The crowd murmured, some nodding in acknowledgement, while others watched her with skepticism. Aisha took a deep breath, maintaining her composure despite the underlying tension. I understand that change is necessary, and I'm here to work with you to ensure that every patient receives the care and respect they deserve. Let's start by fostering open communication and holding ourselves accountable for our actions. Before she could continue, a voice from the back of the crowd interrupted her. Are you part of the administration, Dr. Bennett, or are you just another staff member who's out of touch with the community? Aisha glanced toward the source of the voice, recognizing the man as Officer Tom Reynolds, a local law enforcement officer who had recently been criticized for his handling of minor disturbances in town. His presence was unexpected and added an edge of hostility to the gathering. She remained calm, meeting his gaze without flinching. Officer Reynolds, I'm here to listen, and to ensure that our hospital serves everyone in our community fairly. If you have concerns, I'm here to address them." Tom stepped forward, his expression hard. "Don't think for a second that we trust the hospital to fix these issues. We've seen too many promises broken." Aisha felt the simmering anger beneath his words, but chose not to let it affect her professionalism. "I understand your frustration, and I'm committed to making real, tangible changes. It's not about promises. It's about action." The tension in the air was palpable, the crowd watching the exchange with bated breath. Aisha could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. But she held her ground, determined to bridge the gap between the hospital and the community. As the confrontation unfolded, another protester stepped forward. A young woman with fiery eyes and a clipboard. "Dr. Bennett, we need to see results. Words are not enough anymore." Aisha nodded, her resolve hardening. "You're right. Actions speak louder than words. I'm here to take the first step, and I promise you, we will continue to work together until we achieve the equity and respect our community deserves." With that, she stepped back, allowing the conversation to shift toward collaborative solutions rather than confrontation. The crowd seemed to respond positively, some nodding in agreement, while others began to approach her with specific concerns and suggestions. As the meeting progressed, Aisha felt a sense of purpose reignite within her. The initial hostility was a hurdle, but it also underscored the urgency of her mission. She knew that fostering trust and implementing meaningful changes would require persistence, empathy, and unwavering commitment. After the protest dispersed, Aisha returned to her office, the events of the day replaying in her mind. She sat down at her desk, the weight of her responsibilities more tangible than ever. Her phone buzzed with a message from Michael Harper. "Let's discuss the next steps at 2 p.m. She quickly replied with a confirmation and began outlining her plan. First, conduct one-on-one interviews with the staff members involved in the complaints. Second, organize a series of workshops on unconscious bias and cultural competency. Third, establish a feedback system where patients can anonymously report their experiences." Her thoughts were interrupted by another message from Kiara. "I talked to some students about the mural project. They're really inspired by your actions today. We need to amplify our voices together." Aisha smiled, feeling the strength of her family's support. "We're in this together, Kiara. Let's make sure our actions lead to lasting change." As the clock ticked toward her meeting with Michael, Aisha reflected on the subtle and overt prejudices she had witnessed today. Officer Reynolds' skepticism, the dismissive attitude of some staff members, and the community's palpable frustration all highlighted the systemic challenges she was determined to overcome. Yet, her commitment to maintaining professionalism and empathy remained steadfast, even as her internal struggle between anger and composure intensified. The meeting with Michael was concise, but impactful. They discussed the immediate steps Aisha had outlined and brainstormed additional strategies to ensure the hospital's efforts were both effective and sustainable. Michael emphasized the importance of transparency and community involvement, suggesting regular updates and open forums where patients and staff could voice their concerns and suggestions. As Aisha left the meeting, she felt a renewed sense of determination. The initial conflict was only the beginning, but it was a necessary catalyst for the changes she was committed to implementing. She knew that the path ahead would be challenging, filled with resistance and setbacks, but she was prepared to navigate it with grace and resilience. That evening, as the Bennetts gathered for dinner, Aisha shared the day's events with her family. "Today was a pivotal moment," she began, her voice calm, yet filled with resolve. "We're starting to make progress, but there's still a lot of work to be done." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I'm proud of you, Aisha. It takes a lot of courage to stand up like that." Kiara reached across the table, her eyes shining with admiration. "You're making a real difference, Mom. Just like Dad would have wanted." Aisha felt a surge of gratitude for her family's unwavering support. "Thank you, both of you. We're all in this together." As the evening wore on, Aisha found a moment of peace, sitting alone in her study with a cup of tea. She gazed out the window, the town of Willowbrook bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The day's events had solidified her resolve, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something more significant was on the horizon, something that would test her strength and commitment in ways she hadn't yet imagined. A knock on her door broke her reverie. It was Michael, holding a stack of documents. "Aisha, I think you need to see this," he said, handing her the papers. She took the documents, her eyes scanning the contents quickly. The reports detailed not only the complaints, but also troubling patterns of behavior among several staff members. It was clear that systemic biases were more deeply entrenched than she had initially thought. "This is worse than we anticipated," Aisha murmured, her mind racing. "We need to act swiftly to address these issues before they escalate further." Michael nodded solemnly. "I agree, we should prioritize the most critical cases and ensure that our response is comprehensive and effective." Aisha felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The stakes were higher than she had imagined, and the road to meaningful change would be long and arduous. But she also felt a flicker of hope that with determination, empathy, and the support of her family and community, she could navigate the challenges ahead and create a more equitable and compassionate healthcare environment for all. The sun had long set over Willowbrook, leaving the town bathed in the soft glow of streetlights and the occasional flicker of neon signs. Inside St. Mary's Hospital, the atmosphere was tense. Dr. Aisha Bennett sat in her office, surrounded by piles of reports and patient testimonials. Each document she reviewed deepened her understanding of the systemic issues plaguing the institution. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders, but her resolve remained unshaken. As midnight approached, Aisha finally leaned back in her chair, exhaustion evident in the dark circles beneath her eyes. The room was silent, except for the distant hum of the hospital's night operations. She was so engrossed in her work that she barely noticed the soft knock at her door. "Aisha, can I come in?" Dr. Michael Harper's voice was hesitant, betraying a hint of unease. She glanced up, nodding. "Yes, Michael, come in." Michael stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. His usually confident demeanor was marred by concern. "I've been reviewing the reports you sent over. It's clear that the issues are more widespread than we initially thought." Aisha sighed, rubbing her temples. "I suspected as much. It's not just a few isolated incidents. There's a pattern here that we need to address comprehensively." Michael leaned against the desk, his expression serious. "There's something else you should know. Officer Daniels, the head of security, has been increasingly vocal about maintaining strict control over the hospital's operations. He's expressed doubts about the necessity of these investigations, claiming they're disrupting the workflow." Aisha felt a chill run down her spine. Officer Daniels was known for his rigid adherence to protocol and his reluctance to embrace change. His influence within the hospital was significant, and his opposition could pose a serious obstacle to her efforts. "What do you suggest we do?" Aisha asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We need to approach this delicately. Officer Daniels has the ear of the hospital board, and any direct confrontation could backfire. We should gather more evidence to present an undeniable case that even he can't ignore." Aisha nodded thoughtfully. "Agreed. We need to build an irrefutable dossier that highlights not just the complaints, but also the systemic failures contributing to these issues. This includes training deficiencies, lack of accountability, and any discriminatory policies that may exist." Michael reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I believe in your ability to lead this, Aisha. But be prepared for pushback. Some of the senior staff might not take kindly to these revelations." Aisha met his gaze, determination shining in her eyes. "I understand. But the well-being of our patients and the integrity of our institution depend on it. We can't afford to turn a blind eye anymore." Their conversation was interrupted by another knock, this time more insistent. Aisha frowned, wondering who else could be disrupting her late-night work. "Come in." The door swung open to reveal Nurse Lillian Thompson, a respected veteran in the hospital, known for her compassionate care and unwavering dedication. Her usually composed face was etched with worry. "Aisha, I need to speak with you," Lillian said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Aisha gestured for her to sit, immediately sensing the gravity of the situation. "What's wrong, Lillian?" Lillian took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's about Karen Matthews. She's been acting even more erratically since you started your investigation yesterday. She refused to take Marcus Thompson's vitals, claiming she didn't have time today. She almost had a confrontation with a patient who insisted on receiving proper care." Aisha felt a surge of frustration. This is exactly what we need to address. Can you provide specific instances and any witnesses? Lillian nodded. I've documented everything. I think it's time we present this to the board. Aisha's heart pounded. The situation was escalating rapidly, and the pushback from within the hospital was becoming more overt. I'll take a look at your documentation first thing in the morning. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Lillian. As Lillian left, Aisha felt the walls closing in. The internal resistance was fierce, and she knew that overcoming it would require strategic planning and unwavering support from her allies. She turned her attention back to the reports, her mind racing with possible solutions. The following day dawned bright and clear, but the tension at St. Mary's was palpable. Aisha arrived early, her mind focused on the tasks ahead. She met with Nurse Lillian Thompson, who handed her a stack of meticulously detailed reports. These are all the incidents involving Nurse Matthews, Lillian explained. There are multiple witnesses who can attest to her behavior, including several patients and other staff members. Aisha reviewed the documents, her frustration growing with each page. The evidence was undeniable, painting a picture of deliberate neglect and bias. We need to present this to the board immediately, she declared. Michael looked uneasy. Are you sure the board can be very resistant to this kind of scrutiny, especially when it involves one of their own? Aisha met his concern with resolve. If we don't act now, more patients will suffer. It's our duty to ensure that St. Mary's upholds the highest standards of care and equity. Reluctantly, Michael agreed. All right, let's set up a meeting for this afternoon. I'll inform the board members and arrange for all necessary documentation to be presented. As the hours ticked by, Aisha prepared her presentation, ensuring every detail was accounted for. When the board meeting finally commenced, the room was filled with senior staff, including Officer Daniels, Principal Margaret Benson, and other influential figures within the hospital. Aisha stood at the front, her presence commanding yet humble. She began by outlining the scope of the issue, presenting the documented incidents involving Nurse Matthews and highlighting the broader systemic failures that allowed such behavior to persist. Our patients deserve better, Aisha stated firmly. We have a responsibility to provide equitable and compassionate care, free from bias and neglect. Ignoring these issues not only harms our patients, but also undermines the integrity of our institution. Officer Daniels leaned forward, his expression skeptical. Dr. Bennett, while your concerns are valid, we must also consider the impact of these allegations on our staff morale and the hospital's reputation. How do you propose we address this without causing further disruption? Aisha met his gaze calmly. By taking decisive action and implementing comprehensive training programs, we need to foster an environment where all staff members are held accountable for their actions and are equipped to provide the best possible care to every patient, regardless of their background. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, but not everyone was convinced. Some board members exchanged uneasy glances, while others appeared reluctant to accept the severity of the situation. Principal Margaret Benson spoke up, her voice measured. Dr. Bennett, I appreciate your dedication to improving our hospital. However, we need to ensure that any actions we take are fair and just. Removing a staff member based on these reports could have significant repercussions. Aisha took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. I understand the gravity of these decisions, but patient safety and equitable care must come first. We can't afford to let personal biases dictate the quality of our services. It's not just about one nurse, it's about the culture we're fostering within St. Mary's, Officer Daniels interjected, his tone dismissive. While your intentions are commendable, we must approach this with caution. Accusations of this nature can tarnish our reputation irreparably. Perhaps a more measured approach would be prudent. Aisha felt her frustration simmer beneath the surface, but she kept her voice steady. Measured approaches have failed us so far. The evidence is clear, and inaction only perpetuates the problem. It's time for bold steps to ensure that our hospital lives up to its commitment to excellence and equity. The room fell silent, the tension thick as board members deliberated. Finally, Chairperson Dr. Robert Ellis stood, his expression resolute. Dr. Bennett, your presentation highlights serious concerns that we cannot ignore. We will take your recommendations into consideration and begin implementing the necessary changes immediately. Aisha nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. "Thank you, Dr. Ellis. I'm committed to working with the board and the entire hospital staff to drive these changes forward." As the meeting adjourned, Aisha felt a sense of accomplishment, tempered by the knowledge that the road ahead would still be challenging. She had taken the first step toward addressing the systemic issues, but she knew that true change would require persistent effort and unwavering dedication. However, just as she was about to leave the room, a loud crash echoed through the hallways, followed by frantic voices and the blaring of alarms. Aisha's heart raced as she realized that something was terribly wrong. Dr. Michael Harper rushed toward her, panic etched on his face. "Aisha, you need to see this. It's happening now." Without hesitation, Aisha followed Michael through the corridors, the chaos growing with each step. They reached the main lobby to find the front doors smashed open and several masked individuals pouring into the building. The sight sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. "What's going on?" Aisha demanded, trying to maintain her composure amidst the turmoil. Michael grabbed her arm, urgency in his voice. "It's a coordinated attack. They're targeting the administrative offices, trying to disrupt our operations. We need to secure the patients and ensure everyone's safety." As Aisha and Michael navigated through the frantic staff and scared patients, they could hear the shouts and threats from the attackers. The air was thick with fear and uncertainty. The hospital transformed from a place of healing to a battleground of conflict. Aisha's mind raced. Was this attack related to the recent board meeting? Had her efforts to expose systemic bias made powerful enemies within the hospital or the broader community? The questions swirled in her mind as she focused on guiding the panicked patients to safety. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows. A senior staff member known for her unwavering support of the hospital's traditional practices, Dr. Evelyn Shaw, the head of administration, stood defiantly, her face pale but determined. "Aisha, stop this now!" Evelyn commanded, her voice loud and authoritative. "You're causing unnecessary chaos. Leave this to us." Aisha stared at her, confusion and frustration mixing in her expression. "Dr. Shaw, what are you doing? Who are these people?" Before Evelyn could respond, one of the masked attackers lunged toward Aisha, grabbing her by the arm. She struggled to break free, her training as a surgeon giving her a sharp edge of resilience. Michael intervened, pulling her back and engaging with another attacker. "This isn't the time for internal conflicts," Aisha shouted over the chaos. "We need to protect our patients and staff." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes filled with desperation. "Aisha, listen to me. They're here because of what you've been doing. You need to stop this madness before it destroys everything we've built." Aisha's heart pounded as she tried to make sense of Evelyn's words. "What are you talking about? Why would they target the hospital because of my efforts to create change?" Evelyn's face twisted with anger and fear. "You think you're making a difference, but you're tearing the institution apart. This isn't the way we need order, stability, not your reckless crusade." Aisha took a step forward, meeting Evelyn's gaze with unwavering determination. "Order and stability can't exist if we're perpetuating injustice and neglecting our patients' needs. I won't back down, Evelyn. We need to stand up for what's right." Before Evelyn could respond, another attacker advanced, pushing Aisha back toward Michael. The room erupted into chaos as security staff and medical personnel tried to fend off the intruders. Aisha's mind raced, her internal struggle reaching a boiling point. She had fought against systemic bias with calm professionalism, but now she was thrust into a life-threatening confrontation that tested her resilience in ways she had never imagined. As the attackers continued their assault, Aisha felt a surge of determination. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions. Drawing on her inner strength and the support of her family and community, she vowed to stand her ground and protect those who depended on her. Just as the situation seemed to spiral out of control, the sound of sirens pierced the night air, and reinforcements arrived, driving the attackers back. Police officers and security personnel swiftly regained control, apprehending the remaining assailants and restoring a semblance of order. Breathing heavily, Aisha looked around at the aftermath. The scattered chaos, the relieved but shaken faces of her colleagues and patients. Evelyn stood at a distance, her expression a mix of rage and regret, while Michael approached her with a reassuring presence. "Aisha, are you okay?" Michael asked, his voice filled with concern. She nodded slowly, her mind still reeling from the intensity of the encounter. "Yes, I'm fine. But we need to understand why this happened and who's behind it." Evelyn approached cautiously, her eyes meeting Aisha's with a newfound vulnerability. "I'm sorry, Aisha. I didn't realize how far things had gone. Maybe we do need to find a better way to address these issues." Aisha studied her for a moment, seeing the sincerity behind her conflicted expression. "We can start by working together, Evelyn. Let's ensure that St. Mary's becomes a place where every patient feels valued and respected." As emergency responders began to attend to the wounded and secure the area, Aisha felt the weight of the day settle around her. The confrontation had reached a critical point, forcing her to confront not only external adversaries, but also internal resistance within the very institution she was dedicated to improving. Walking back to her office, she knew that the stakes had never been higher. The events of the past hours had ignited a fire within her, a burning desire to fight for justice and equity with even greater fervor. She glanced at the stack of reports on her desk, realizing that her mission was far from over. If anything, it had only intensified. As she sat down, Aisha made a silent vow to persevere, to harness her internal strength and the support of her allies to bring about meaningful change. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but she was ready to face them head-on, driven by the unwavering belief that equity and compassion could transform not just the hospital, but the entire community. The aftermath of the attack at St. Mary's Hospital left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Aisha Bennett sat in her office, the once orderly space now cluttered with paperwork and hastily scribbled notes from the day's events. The room felt colder, the silence heavier. The confrontation with Dr. Evelyn Shaw echoed in her mind, a stark reminder of the resistance she faced. As dawn broke over Willowbrook, the hospital was abuzz with activity. News of the attack had spread quickly, stirring a mix of fear and determination among the staff and patients. Security protocols had been heightened, and a palpable tension lingered in the air. Aisha knew that addressing the systemic issues within the hospital was no longer just a professional obligation. It had become a personal mission to protect and uplift her community. Aisha arrived early, her mind already racing with strategies to combat the entrenched biases she was uncovering. She met with Dr. Michael Harper and Nurse Lillian Thompson in the conference room, their faces etched with concern and resolve. "We need to act fast," Aisha began, her voice steady. "The attack yesterday wasn't just an isolated incident. It's a direct response to our efforts to address these systemic issues. We need to protect our staff and patients while continuing to push for the necessary changes." Michael nodded, pulling out a stack of additional reports. "There's been an uptick in hostile behavior from certain staff members since the meeting. Officer Daniels has been particularly vocal about maintaining the status quo. He's even been seen talking to some of the more conservative staff, trying to rally them against our initiatives." Lillian leaned forward, her expression serious. "We've also received anonymous threats against our team. It's clear that there are elements within the hospital who want to derail our progress by any means necessary." Aisha felt a surge of frustration, but kept her composure. "We need to strengthen our support systems and ensure that everyone involved feels safe and backed by the administration. I'm considering bringing in an external consultant to help us navigate these challenges and provide unbiased training on unconscious bias and cultural competency." Michael looked thoughtful. "That's a good idea. We might also need to escalate this to the State Health Board if things don't improve. The safety of our patients and staff is non-negotiable." As they discussed their next steps, the door to the conference room swung open. Officer Daniels entered, his presence commanding the room. He wore his usual stern expression, but there was an underlying tension in his eyes. "Dr. Bennett, Dr. Harper, Nurse Thompson," Daniels greeted them curtly. "We need to talk." Aisha exchanged a wary glance with Michael before addressing him. "What's the issue, Officer Daniels?" He crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. "I've been hearing concerns from some of the staff about your recent activities. This hospital isn't equipped to handle a witch hunt, and your relentless push for change is causing more harm than good." Aisha took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Officer Daniels, our goal is to create a safer and more equitable environment for everyone here. If certain actions are causing distress, We need to address them constructively. Daniels shook his head slowly. It's not just about creating a better environment. You're disrupting the workflow, undermining authority, and now, provoking violent actions against our institution. This needs to stop before things escalate further. Aisha felt the tension in the room rise, but she remained calm. Violence is never the answer, Officer Daniels. Our efforts are aimed at preventing such incidents by addressing the root causes of systemic bias and ensuring that every patient receives the care they deserve. Daniels' eyes narrowed, a mix of frustration and determination burning within them. You're walking a fine line, Dr. Bennett. Continue down this path, and you'll find yourself facing more resistance, both from within and outside these walls. Before Aisha could respond, the door burst open again, this time revealing a group of senior doctors and administrators. Dr. Evelyn Shaw stood at the forefront, her expression hardened and resolute. "We need to put an end to this," Evelyn declared, her voice cutting through the room. "Your methods are causing chaos, and it's time to restore order, Dr. Bennett. If you continue to push this agenda, we'll have no choice but to take more drastic measures." Aisha felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but her resolve only strengthened. "Evelyn, our goal is to improve patient care and ensure that no one is overlooked or mistreated because of unconscious biases. Ignoring these issues only perpetuates the problems we're trying to solve." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes meeting Aisha's with a steely gaze. "You're idealistic, Dr. Bennett, but idealism won't pay the bills or keep the hospital running smoothly. We need practical solutions, not your lofty ideals." As the confrontation escalated, the room seemed to close in around Aisha. The weight of the systemic challenges and the personal attacks bore down on her, but she refused to back down. She knew that this was a pivotal moment, not just for her, but for the entire hospital and the community it served. Just then, an urgent alert blared through the hospital's intercom system. A patient in the intensive care unit had gone into cardiac arrest, and the situation required immediate attention. The room fell silent as everyone's focus shifted to the crisis unfolding in the hospital. Aisha stood up, her professional demeanor unwavering. "We need to act now. Let's prioritize getting the patient stabilized. We can address the other issues once the immediate emergency is under control." Daniels and Evelyn exchanged frustrated glances, but quickly moved to assist their colleagues, the earlier tension momentarily set aside for the sake of saving a life. As Aisha rushed to the intensive care unit, her mind raced with thoughts of the ongoing conflict. The attack had exposed the deep-seated issues within the hospital, and the confrontation with Evelyn had only highlighted the resistance she faced. In the intensive care unit, Aisha quickly assessed the patient's condition, coordinating with the medical team to stabilize him. Her hands moved with practiced precision, her mind focused entirely on the task at hand. The crisis was a stark reminder of why she fought so hard for equitable care. Every second counted, every decision mattered. As the situation stabilized, Aisha took a moment to catch her breath, her thoughts returning to the earlier confrontation. She knew that addressing systemic bias was more critical than ever, but the resistance from influential figures like Officer Daniels and Dr. Evelyn Shaw made it increasingly difficult. Back in her office, Aisha found Michael and Lillian waiting for her, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. "We need to escalate our efforts," Michael said quietly. "The resistance is too strong, and the threats are becoming more personal. We might need to involve the State Health Board and seek legal counsel to protect ourselves and our patients." Aisha nodded, her mind racing with the implications of their next steps. "You're right. We can't let fear dictate our actions. It's time to take a stand and ensure that St. Mary's Hospital is a place of equity and compassion." As they strategized, Aisha felt a surge of internal strength. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but she was determined to see it through. Her family's unwavering support and her own commitment to justice fueled her resolve. Later that evening, as the hospital settled into a tense quiet, Aisha received a call from the State Health Board requesting an emergency meeting. The message was clear. The escalating issues at St. Mary's had caught their attention, and they wanted to discuss potential interventions and support. Aisha shared the news with Michael and Lillian, their faces reflecting a mix of relief and anxiety. "This could be the support we need," Michael said cautiously. but it also means that the higher-ups are aware of how deep the issues run. Aisha took a deep breath, her mind focused on the next steps. We need to present our case clearly and comprehensively, highlight the systemic issues, the specific incidents, and our proposed solutions. This is our chance to make a real impact. As the day of the meeting approached, the tension within the hospital reached a boiling point. Officer Daniels and Dr. Evelyn Shaw became more vocal in their opposition, rallying like-minded staff members against Aisha's initiatives. The hospital environment became increasingly hostile, with whispers of sabotage and overt acts of undermining her authority. One afternoon, as Aisha was preparing for the State Health Board meeting, she found her office trashed. Papers were strewn across the floor, her laptop was missing, and her personal belongings were disorganized. The message was clear. Someone wanted to derail her efforts by making her appear incompetent and disorganized. Aisha stood amidst the chaos, a mix of anger and determination coursing through her veins. She refused to let these acts of sabotage intimidate her. With the support of Michael and Lillian, she began to rebuild, documenting the vandalism and seeking security footage to identify the perpetrators. As she worked late into the night, Aisha received a text from Kiara. "We believe in you. Keep fighting. We're with you." The message was a beacon of hope, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this battle. Drawing strength from her family's unwavering support, Aisha refocused her efforts, determined to overcome the obstacles in her path. The day of the State Health Board meeting arrived, and the tension in the hospital was palpable. Staff members whispered nervously in the hallways, some supporting Aisha's efforts, while others sided with Daniels and Shaw. Aisha knew that this meeting was the turning point, a moment that could either solidify her mission or crush it under the weight of institutional resistance. As she walked into the boardroom, she was greeted by a panel of stern-faced officials and a few familiar faces from the hospital administration. Officer Daniels and Dr. Evelyn Shaw sat at the front, their expressions guarded and resolute. Michael and Lillian were seated beside her, offering silent support. Aisha took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the room settle around her. She began her presentation, laying out the documented incidents, the systemic failures, and the urgent need for comprehensive training and policy reforms. Her voice was steady, her demeanor professional, yet impassioned. "We have a responsibility to ensure that every patient receives equitable and compassionate care," she declared, her eyes meeting those of the board members. "Ignoring these issues only perpetuates the systemic biases that harm our community and undermine the integrity of our institution." Officer Daniels interjected, his tone dismissive. "Dr. Bennett, while your concerns are valid, implementing these changes would require significant resources and time. We need practical solutions that don't disrupt our operations." Aisha remained composed, her resolve unshaken. "Practical solutions are precisely what we need. Comprehensive training and policy reforms are investments in our hospital's future. They ensure that we provide the best possible care to every patient, regardless of their background." Dr. Evelyn Shaw leaned forward, her expression stern. "But Dr. Bennett, your methods have already caused unrest among the staff. People are feeling targeted and undervalued. How do you propose we balance improvement with maintaining a cohesive work environment?" Aisha met her gaze calmly. "Change is never easy, Dr. Shaw. It requires courage and commitment from everyone involved. We need to foster a culture of empathy, accountability, and continuous improvement. By addressing these issues head-on, we can create a more supportive and effective environment for both our staff and patients." The room was silent, the tension thick as the board members deliberated. Aisha could feel the anticipation building, knowing that this was the moment that would determine the future of St. Mary's Hospital. Finally, the chairperson spoke, her voice measured. "Dr. Bennett, your presentation highlights critical issues that we cannot ignore. We recognize the importance of addressing systemic biases and improving patient care. We will approve the implementation of your proposed training programs and policy reforms. However, we expect immediate progress and cooperation from all staff members." Aisha felt a surge of relief and triumph. "Thank you, Chairperson. I assure you, we will work diligently to make these changes effective and lasting." As the meeting concluded, Aisha was approached by several board members who offered their support and expressed their commitment to fostering a more inclusive environment. Officer Daniels and Dr. Shaw, however, remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Leaving the boardroom, Aisha felt a renewed sense of purpose. The approval of the State Health Board was a significant victory, but she knew that the true battle was just beginning. The systemic biases within the hospital were deeply entrenched, and overcoming them would require persistent effort and unwavering dedication. That evening, as Aisha returned home, she found her family waiting for her. Kiara was the first to greet her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You did it, Mom. You're making a difference." Marcus smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "I knew you could do it now, we just have to keep pushing forward." Aisha felt the strength of her family's support, fueling her determination to continue her mission. She knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but with their unwavering encouragement, she was ready to face whatever obstacles lay in her way. As the Bennetts sat down for dinner, the conversation flowed with a sense of hope and determination. Aisha shared the outcome of the board meeting, the support they had received, and the road ahead for implementing the necessary changes. Kiara, always the activist, suggested organizing community forums to engage more voices in the conversation. "We need to make sure that the community is involved and that their voices are heard. It's not just about the hospital, it's about the entire town." Aisha nodded thoughtfully. "That's a great idea. Kiara, collaboration is key to creating lasting change." As the night deepened, the Bennetts felt a renewed sense of unity and purpose. Aisha's unwavering resolve, combined with her family's support, fortified her determination to overcome the systemic biases that plagued St. Mary's Hospital. However, as they settled into their evening routine, an unexpected message appeared on Aisha's phone. "You've made powerful enemies. Be careful what you wish for." The ominous text sent a chill down her spine, a stark reminder that her fight for justice was attracting dangerous attention. She looked up at her family, their faces filled with concern, but she maintained her composure. "We're in this together," she reassured them, her voice steady despite the unease settling in her chest. "No matter what comes our way, we'll face it as a family." As the Bennetts prepared for bed, the weight of the message lingered in Aisha's mind. The stakes were higher than ever, and she knew that the battle for equity and compassion within St. Mary's Hospital was far from over. The unresolved tensions and the lurking threats hinted at a looming confrontation that would test her strength and resolve like never before. Aisha lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts a whirlwind of strategy and anticipation. The path to meaningful change was fraught with obstacles, but she was ready to navigate them with grace and determination. The coming days would require every ounce of her strength and resilience, but she was prepared to stand firm against the injustices that threatened to undermine her mission. Little did she know, the true test of her resolve was just around the corner, a moment that would push her to the brink and force her to make choices that could alter the course of her life and the lives of those she was committed to helping.